Hey, ladies and gentlemen, Shay Ryan Douglas here, and I'm joined with Dennis O'Connor. We've had some amazing chats in the past on the Awakening in Health channel. You can watch it on YouTube, but we have received a few strikes on our YouTube channel. So we also have an uncensored platform called EHTV, where you can find all the Awakening in Health series with Dennis O'Connor, who's a 15 years clinical nurse consultant and has been on a tremendous journey. We've had multiple discussions around the importance of vitamin D, looking at mental well-being, looking at the positive solutions, as well as exposing the truth of what is happening in the world right now. There is so much that is unraveling at a rapid pace, so much changing, as you could probably all agree, so much uncertainty and confusion in the air. And today we just hope to shed some light on some of the fallacies, some of the beliefs that we could rely on and trust in, and just unpacking some of the myths that are out there right now, because we're bombarded with information, we're bombarded with opinions from others, and we're just going to share a small piece based on experience and how we can work through this together, how we can shift the paradigm and trust in what's unraveling before our eyes. So thanks, Dennis, for joining me. Absolute pleasure to have you here, brother.
Yeah, good to have you back. We've been a bit slack putting these together, so it's really nice to connect with you again, Shay.
Awesome. So let's dive into it, Dennis. What's your take on what's been going on in the world right now? Obviously, the big discussion right now is the vaccine mandates. Melbourne, Sydney going strong on pushing this, making business employers make sure that their employees have got their passports. So how do you feel about that?
So I guess just to pre-qualify, I've still got my YouTube channel, but I think it's probably going to be on its last legs with these discussions. But so I might substitute the word jabs for anything we're talking about in relation to the V word, which is, I mean, even just the fact that we've got to consider stuff like that just is a very condemning kind of thought on what's going on with society in general. The fact that we're not even allowed to say certain words. But yeah, I think probably this is one of the most horrendous things I've ever seen happen to humanity. And I also think that it's up there with stuff that happened in certain notorious wars that people often refer to. I think humanity is under attack.
That's a huge statement, and I'm pretty excited to unpack in what ways you feel that is happening. And we're starting to see it in a lot of mob coming together to show their standing, to stand firm in their place as a human being. And we know through, as you've shared before, what you believe you will achieve. And so if someone believes that this could be a safe option for them moving forward and could help the community, is it within their right to make that choice and that decision?
So again, we've kind of been trapped, I think, in the last few decades of responding very emotively, and what that does, it actually takes us away from facts and statistics. And there's lots of different attacks in different areas as well. And just before we jumped on, I was telling you that it'd be a very good kind of thing to cover some of the fallacies that are going on around there. And one of the reasons I think that's important is to be able to have a conversation with people and realize some of the trips that the media are kind of putting out there that people take up, and they're actually fallacious arguments. Okay, that means the arguments don't carry any weight if you know how to break them down properly. So I wanted to first of all just touch on them. I want to see happening. You got two opposing fallacies that are always getting thrown around at the moment. You've got one, which is the appeal to authority fallacy. And you've got some very prominent figures. There's a despicable little I don't want to swear on your channel. A subhuman, I'd almost call him, called Fauci in America, who gets referred to all the time as being a leading expert. And people, the fallacy behind this is, if you have an expert who's delivering you misinformation, you can't blindly accept this. You have to look at the facts behind it. Okay. And on the opposing end of the scale, you have people, maybe I'd even fall into this bracket. I don't consider myself necessarily a world expert on anything. I'm more of a jack of all trades, but I do like to connect information given to me by experts. And I did research on that. And that's what I deliver to people who listen to the stuff I say. But maybe more so for yourself if you're not necessarily in health, Shay. But is again what's called an ad hominem attack. Okay. And this is very, very relevant because what we're finding is that when people are trying to deliver relevant information and good statistics and trying to open up conversations, if the other party appears to be losing, what they launch into, and reporters and the media are doing this brutally at the moment, and it's absolutely it's disgusting. It's one of the lowest ways to try and debate any point, is if they can't debate the facts, then they attack the person, and this is your ad hominem attack. So the idea might be that, I don't know, I'm blown up in the papers. I've had an affair with I don't know, a babysitter, and I've been on drugs or whatever the hell, and I might deliver some absolutely relevant, spot on information. But that information is all of a sudden invalidated by the fact that I've been, marginalized as being some sort of, unsavory character. And there's also the old expression called throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I think we've all got to be really bloody careful. And I certainly, I used to do this probably quite a few years ago, but now I'm all very careful. What I try to do is I try to look at the other side of an argument and my position. So I will still do things like I'll look at what's going on social media, because I'm aware of that. I don't want to throw the baby and the bathwater out together, because there's still relevant stuff in people who are delivering opinions that are not the same as yours. And these attacks on people like yourself and myself who are trying to deliver relevant statistics and details are being basically undermined with fallacious arguments. And I think it's a good conversation to open up, because I'm guessing that a lot of our listeners are going to be in these conversations as well. And when you start picking up on these little the fallacies in your arguments, you can actually point them out, and you can say stuff like, hang on a second, can you not attack the person? What about the facts? Yeah, I've done X or I've done Y, or I might be or I might not be, or you might think I'm crazy, but the undeniable facts are X, Y, and Z. How would you respond to that? Or if people are saying, well, I heard it from Fauci, then okay, appeal to expert fallacy. Okay. Have you checked the facts? Or are you just relying on the fact that this guy, who happens to own pharmaceutical companies and has companies making billions and billions and billions of dollars out of this, are you going to take everything he says literally and at face value? And my opinion, and that is absolutely blunt, I think this guy is one of the worst friggin' people in the public spotlight at the moment on the planet. This guy Fauci, he's a despicable, horrible subhuman.
Thanks for sharing your opinions there, Dennis, on Fauci. I just wanted to remind everyone that, on the platform, we've got a series focusing on Fauci from various different perspectives and different professionals and experts in their fields. I highly recommend to check that one out. It was a 3-hour event we did at the beginning of the year. And otherwise, continuing on with the fallacies that are out there, could you maybe elaborate? Obviously, you mentioned the professional expert fallacies. Are there any other ones that we should be aware of that we could use as tools to be able to navigate, the belief systems and the facts and the opinions of media, as an example? Like, how do we know if it's true or not? How do we distinguish if independent media is, on one side of the argument or the other?
So I think one of the important things is, again, to pick up on those fallacies when they're thrown out there, okay? Especially the ad hominem attack. I just find it just being used relentlessly, okay? But the other thing is to concentrate on the facts. And what I find we have this big divisive split almost now in humanity. Are you pro this jab, or are you against it? Or you might kill grandma, etc., etc. These things are just flying around the whole time now. But another thing I find that just is happening continually is people in my position, and certainly in yours from the conversation I've had with you, Shay, and a lot of people that I kind of mix with, we seem to know, well, I mean, it's hard not to know what the alternative narrative is, because we're just getting absolutely trounced with it and bombarded with it. But we are looking at stuff to validate what we see. But what I seem to find is the people who are on the other side of this counter narrative have no idea about the information. And the problem here is you're not making an informed decision about anything unless you're looking at everything. And time and time again, we just hear these throwaway media headlines being thrown out by these people who just don't have a bloody clue. We've got information everywhere. We've got enough data to be able to validate and back up all the things that we are saying that some people might sound crazy. We've got the VAERS reporting system in America. We've got the Yellow Book recording system in England. We have the TGA guidelines and their information in Australia. So we've got the data is absolutely overwhelming that this jab is absolutely highly dangerous. It is causing thousands and thousands of people to be seriously injured every week, and it is killing people. And they want to put this untested muck in our young children who do not die of this so-called pandemic. So it's just abhorrent. These evil companies are coming for our children. And again, we have data. We have historic information that these companies are literally evil. They don't care about us. They want to make profits, and they're killing us as a result.
Yep. I hear you, Dennis. Thanks for sharing that. Something that I'm interested in, though, if I'm looking at the counter argument here in this situation, we've got these really great foundations that are supposedly looking after the people on the planet, who are countering any misinformation out there by backing the so-called science. And I just want to pull up an example here. I've just discovered that the Rockefeller Foundation, they have committed $13.5 million in funding to strengthen the public health response efforts to counteract any misinformation. And then that just begs the question, who is sharing, correct information and who is sharing misinformation? It opens up this whole dialogue around information warfare at the expense of who, as you mentioned. Absolutely. The children in this situation who are being subject to this inoculation from people that maybe they don't feel is resonating or for them. So it's interesting article that they've been very clear in stating that they're taking this approach to really help people shut down anything that is going against their vision or their narrative, let's say their story. So how do we distinguish, who what side, who is right information, who is misinformation, if it's coming from a credible source, if it's uncredible? There's just so much in the air right now that it's very challenging to navigate through the high seas, and people are, just getting caught up in the wave of what we're being forced and manipulated into believing, and just going along with this bigger narrative. And so, it takes a lot for a human being to stand firm in their ground and even swim against the current to speak their truth and share what's really going on. And I guess my question that I'd like to invite you to share on is just how do we as individuals and also collective communities come together to stand firm in what we feel and what we believe to be our truth when there's this huge push going against us?
Yeah, very interesting question, Shay. And there's a lot of little avenues that I can tangent off onto it. But one of my, I guess, biggest revelations probably, and I started to see this stuff a little bit more clearly, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago. And now I'm in the position that I don't think anybody, especially in healthcare, can do effective healthcare without looking at some of the history involved behind the whole healthcare system. You have to know about this in order to be able to formulate a more balanced and a more informed decision. The other thing which I think is absolutely vital for people, especially experts in healthcare, to be aware of, is how the financial systems work. Okay, and if you can't integrate those three pieces or two pieces, into your discussion about healthcare, it invalidates so much. And I'll just open that up a little bit more. So you pulled up that report by the Rockefeller Institution. And if people don't realize that the Rockefeller Institution is essentially the institution behind what we call the whole of allopathic healthcare. This is the modern medical system. It was more or less created by the Rockefeller Foundation, okay? And all this came about in about the late 1870s to the early 1920s and 1930s. That was based off the back of the petrochemical industry. So all the medications that were being sold, that had started to be sold around then, not only to humans but also to animals in veterinary, were based on a petrochemical industry. So we're looking at stuff that is based purely on profit and on selling things. So once this allopathic system was created, it turned into a behemoth, a monster. And these are the people that are controlling the literature and the information, and they're sponsoring the science behind how doctors and nurses and health professionals are trained. Again, looking at the history of medicine, we had something come out in I think either 1910 or 1913, I can't quite remember, called the Flexnore Report, written by a fellow called Albert Flexnor. And it was actually sponsored by the Carnegie Institute and the Rockefeller Institute. And this is one of the worst things to ever happen to the health of humanity, was this report. And this is where the whole concept of quackery originated from. So essentially, this Flexnore report described anything other than what we now call mainstream health as quackery. Okay, but before this report, so many other modalities were thriving, and what we look at now with doctors and nurses and surgeries, that was actually the small. They were the smaller industries. Things like homeopathy, things like chiropractors, osteopaths, you name it. All these things were much more credible. This Flexnore report basically discredited all these other modalities, which, if you start looking at them, there's actually a lot of different merits behind them, and a lot of them are very, very, they work. So, and what people don't realize is that Flexnor's brother, he actually was one of the directors of the Carnegie Institute at the time. So essentially, you have this report, which was then delivered to congressmen and people in America, which again, we know that pharmaceutical people and these huge bloody multi-millionaires and billionaires essentially paid for politicians to pass legislation through. So you had the modern medical system created, and it was created off the back of profits. So then we look at I think we again talk about these authorities like the CDC, for example, or the FDA in America. The FDA in America was originally the I think it was something like the Petrochemical Bureau or something like this. It was a chemical organization to try to convince the public that chemicals were safe, and this morphed into the Food and Drug Administration in the US. Things like the CDC. The CDC more or less became again, are almost exclusively funded by pharmaceutical companies. The World Health Organization, we look into the history of the World Health Organization was pushing smoking in the 60s and 70s. The same lawyers from the World Health Organization were in the tobacco industry. I think from memory, in about the 70s or 80s, one of the prominent speakers in the World Health Organization was actually working with the tobacco industry at the same time. So once we have this knowledge that some of these so-called, companies who were given the impression that they're looking after our best interests, once we look at where these companies have come from, then all of a sudden we might think that, hang on a second, maybe these guys don't have our best interests at heart. Maybe they just want to get money off our backs. And unfortunately, and this is just a fact, but healthy people do not generate money for the pharmaceutical industry. It's in the pharmaceuticals companies, industries to have sick, bloody people. So again, when people are putting some of these basic facts together, they might be able to have a little bit more of a nuanced argument. And then actually looking into the history of the pharmaceutical companies themselves, you've got a whole other quagmire there. And these guys, these entities are absolutely criminal, and they're absolutely evil. And time again, we have evidence in lawsuits and court cases about the horrendous crimes that these entities are committing. And these are the guys making our jabs.
Yeah, you bring up some really good points there, and we don't have to look very far through history to notice that, where we've been duped, let's say, as a collective society, particularly going through the petroleum industry, the tobacco industry, how we've been lied to through the wars, the Vietnam War and World War II, and all of these areas of life, that we, as the people, we were sold this narrative or this story that it's for our freedoms and for our health and for our benefit, when it seems that it was potentially only benefiting a select few. And a concern that I have around this was part of the plan is to, divide and conquer, let's say. And that's becoming even more prevalent today with the anti or the pro on all aspects of it. And so I guess my question from a meta level perspective, if we arise above the limitations of being on the battlefield, let's say, and being a warrior of our mission. How do we bring it back into more unified connection, and from a higher level perspective, what are the solutions that we can take into our everyday conversations with people, regardless of what side of the fence they're on? How do we navigate that kind of level of conversation?
Wow, what a great question that is, and there are actually a lot of really good things and a lot of valid things we can do, and I think a divided society is a society that's easier to control. So trying to bridge those gaps and keep those divides less is very, very important. If you have people who are spending a lot of time sitting in front of a television, unfortunately, they are in a fear state, and I think we have to have compassion for that. So it's not necessarily about just having a position on this side and fighting the people on the other side. We have to accept that these people are in a fear state. They're not well informed, and we actually have to treat them with compassion and love. If you look at some of the stuff about drug and alcohol techniques, you also have, when we're talking about trying to change people's addictive patterns, we come across resistance. And when you get resistance, there's not really much point in doing anything about it, but just demonstrating compassion and kindness. And when you meet resistance, there's a term we use in drug and alcohol settings called rolling with resistance. So if you have somebody who you feel might want to listen or might be open to some of the information that you want to deliver, then go run with that. But again, also don't fall into the traps that the mainstream media companies are putting on people, which are your ad hominem attacks. Get people to discuss the facts. Stay clear, stay calm, don't get angry, engage, treat people with love and compassion. And again, I think we if we feel that we do have maybe a more nuanced view of what's going on, or a broader view of what's going on. I mean, the stuff that we're doing, we're not making friends out of this. But again, we see, and I know you certainly see, Shay, a bigger picture, which is a humanity-based picture. And I think we would both say that our efforts to try and further humanity we're trying to do that sort of stuff. So, nobody wants to be that conspiracy theorist. Nobody, we are marginal. It's not a thing that we want to put our hands up and say, hey, we want to be on the fringes of society and be the weird person talking about X, Y, and Z. Doctors, nurses who are speaking out about this stuff, who are getting fired. These guys have got mortgages, they got families, so they don't want that to happen. So if you'd listen to the social media, it's almost like there is a bloody psychological virus where all these crazy people are speaking up. Then we're rational, normal friggin' people who happen to be a hell of a lot more bloody informed than the people who are staring at that friggin' box in the corner of the room 9-10 hours a day.
That's a really good point that you make. Having that level of discernment, particularly in these kind of relatively complex situations where there are many layers to it. But just want to acknowledge, your diligence in doing the research and understanding and exploration through history to lead you to this point, so that when we project into what's coming, we can be most prepared and make those decisions to inform our friends and family and community, regardless of how it's received. And so that's probably what I'd love to finish off on here, is that we seem to be at this precipice, this point in time in history, which is coming to like a vortex of kind of cone-shaped pin-pricking point, right? And from there we have an hourglass opportunity to expand into a new way of being in the world, a new potential, new paradigm, new earth experience. Or we have the same too, depending on our choices that we make, this opportunity to spiral in the opposite direction and kind of cave inwards if these potential agendas that really being forced onto us come into full fruition in that sense. And so moving forward, if you kick the can down a long way down the road, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years time, there is a lot of challenges that we face on a global level, let's say, from environment to health to corporations and finances, the economy. There's many levels of change that seems to be unraveling before our eyes. What's your predictions and kind of best suggestions for us to realign back to a humanitarian perspective that offers life-giving force back to all of our environments, all people, all animals, and what way do we construct our societies to support all humans, regardless of their fringe dwelling kind of level of engagement, or they're really active in the energy system of it. What's your predictions moving forward?
Yeah, listen, unfortunately, I think there's going to be fairly scary times ahead. And, we always seem to have these weird and wonderful suggestions and ideas that seem to pop up. And some of the people who talk about them are considered crazy or conspiracy theorists. And these things eventuate, like these passports. People were talking about these years and years ago. And then with a bit more focus, the people who were mentioning, again, these passports were talking about this, 18 months ago, and they were called crazy. Now we're seeing it happen. So essentially, we get plenty of clues about what could happen in the future. One of the ones that really concerns me a lot is the fact that there's absolutely undoubtable evidence now about some of the horrendous things that are in these shots. And there are a lot of people who are having cardiovascular problems, especially clotting and bleeding problems. And the things that are kind of being bandied around now are things like the Marburg virus and kind of variations of Ebola, which happen to have clotting and blood disorder components to them. And my fear is that this is actually going to happen. We're going to see huge amounts of injury from these shots, especially in the forms of microvascular types bleeding issues. And this is going to be called a new virus. And the other thing that I think is very, very sinister is, in time, people like yourself and myself, if we decline the shots or refuse the shots, are going to be blamed for spreading this so-called virus. And we are going to be healthy carriers because we're not jabbed. And we're going to be infecting the so-called, good citizens who went and did the right thing as per the government's orders. Notwithstanding the fact that pharmaceutical companies essentially own the governments. So again, people don't realize how these systems kind of mesh up. So in order to combat this, we can only, some things are outside of our control. And that's those are those big agenda items that we're talking about. But some things are firmly within our control. And the most important thing that's within our control is our health. And this is why obviously got a health background, but trying to be in as optimal a healthy position yourself is really, really bloody important. That means looking at your screen time. That means getting out in the sun. Again, we've talked about this at length. That means working from a higher vibrational place where your energy is good. And when that happens, your discernment improves. And then the way you're dealing with people and the way you're dealing with yourself and the way you're interpreting your information, all this comes together and improves. Again, doing things like taking time out, having that stillness, having that meditation, getting away from the bombardment which is happening within us. So that's the first thing. The next thing we can control, which again directly relates to our health, not in any way indirectly, is what we're doing. What is our purpose? Are we stuck in these jobs that are earning bloody money for these corporations, getting more into debt, consuming more, getting the bigger television, getting the bigger car? Do you really need it? Or should you maybe minimize a little bit of stuff and have a life with more purpose and with more passion? And I guarantee you, if you do that, you will become more abundant. It's these people who are caught in these debt traps that are in these stress situations, and their cortisol is impaired, and they have this weight gain, and then they got to work, and they got to do extra hours, and then become less healthy, and then they can't look after their children, and then their children are. The list just goes on and on. So you can get back into a simpler and a truer way of living, just with what you're consuming and what you're doing, and in relation to your job. Maybe time to give up your job, maybe time to reintegrate back into nature. But then for those people who are fortunate enough to have a little bit more discretion with their finances, what are you doing with your financial situation? And to have that financial independence and to have that financial freedom is very important. But again, we have such an incredible array of possibilities that could unfold. It is absolutely impossible to specifically say which direction you'd go in. But when it comes to your finances, this is why we talk about diversification. And for me, that would be involved in cryptocurrency, having some precious metals yourself if you can afford them, and having only a small portion of your money in the bank. And then when it comes to making decisions like maybe buying property, I think it's just incredible. We have to be looking at one of the biggest financial crises ever in our history. And for us to be thinking about upgrading or getting a new house or getting that place, by the sea, I think it's ludicrous. If you're thinking along the lines of property and investing in properties, have control of your food. So get a place where you can grow vegetables, where maybe you can have a pen and grow quails or have a supply of meat, because there's tremendous pressure from all quarters on our supply chains, especially our international supply chains. And again, I can go off at length on this information. It's all there. It's already available for us. These supply containers are sitting in their thousands off the coast of California. I'm waiting on some supplies from other things. They're stuck in shipping containers. The transports system on a global level is actually slowly grinding down, and this is going to have massive economic repercussions on us. So again, we got to control the stuff we're in control of, and that, to my mind, means trying to simplify stuff and get back to, I guess, a more truer way of living.
Boom, there you have it, folks. Huge drop from Dennis just in the flow right there. It just bringing us the good news, simplifying life, reconnecting to our food, reestablishing our responsibilities to reclaim our purpose and our meaning and finding fulfillment in our lives. Thank you so much for sharing, Dennis. It's an absolute pleasure to jump on board and have these conversations with you. You're on full form, good fire, just sharing the good news with everyone. Is there anything you want to share before we just wrap up today's chat?
Yeah, listen, again, just a very quick thing in there is also the importance of community, and just, going back to what we said before about having that love, having that compassion, having that respect, but just making those really good community bonds with people, and having, I guess, a support around you. And if things got really, fairly crazy, which I think they could well do, then, you do have somebody who can supply meat, or somebody who has vegetables, or somebody who has health skills. But having that true and honorable community around you, I think, is also a really good key to the complex puzzle we seem to be finding ourselves in.
Great suggestions, and I love the key word that you mentioned there, honorability. Are we truly walking with integrity, honorability in our lives? And if we're not, what happens? What do we become subject to? What happens for our lives and unravels? We'll have that in the next episode coming up in the next week or two with Dennis O'Connor from Awakening in Health. Again, check it out on Earth Heroes TV. The link is in the description. Huge array of great videos on human potential, human health. And my name's Ryan Douglas. Thank you for watching. Please like this video. Leave us a comment if you have any questions. We usually respond to all the comments within a couple of days, and share this video if you found anything that was relevant for you that you'd like to share with your friends. So thanks so much, Dennis, and look forward to
Thank you, Shay.
seeing you guys soon. Bye for now.